Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Nuffield Conference. As Grania said, I'm Pat Collins, and I'm going to be speaking to you today about the benefits of integrated crops and dairy beef production. So, a little introduction to my topic. When I was explaining to people about integrated farming, the first thing they asked me is, what is integrated farming? So, in my view, integrated farming is when you have more than one enterprise on a farm, and when you make a decision, you make it with both enterprises in mind. So integrated farming or mixed farming was the cornerstone of Irish agriculture for centuries. Every farm had a couple of cattle, a few sheep, a few pigs, and grew a bit of grain to support them. But in recent years, we've moved away from that type of farming to more single enterprise farms. These farms have been very sustainable, profitable for the last 50 years, and have stood the farmers in good stead. But now, with current climate challenges and food security challenges, maybe we need to look away from these type of farms to come up with the answers. In 2022, when commodity prices went through the roof, soya, which was typically €400 a tonne, went to 800, and canned fertiliser, that was €200 a tonne, went to 1,000. It was never more evident how unself-sufficient we were in inputs to feed our population. Integrated farming, in my view, can help us meet our climate goals while still allowing us to feed the population. So, my travels took me we started in the UK in January of 2022. As part of my GFP, we travelled to Singapore, Denmark, Brazil, and in Australia, our host was Stuart Tate. Stuart is a beef and crops farmer, similar to myself, a Nuffield scholar, and did his Nuffield topic on a topic very similar to my own, so a visit to his farm was very interesting. We also visited Borneo, where we got the chance to stay with the local tribes in something called the Longhouse, so I'll tell you about that later. When we visited Brazil, we heard a lot about this report that I'll tell you later. I was tempted to send a link for this report to Catherine and try and pass it off as my own one, but I didn't think she'd be too impressed. So, integrated farming. On cropping farms, where you introduce livestock, you have the chance to have a far broader rotation. You can grow crops for forage or for sale, and you can rotate grassland around your cropping farm, your cropping area, which will allow you to rejuvenate your soils far quicker than just staying in a cropping type scenario. Getting organic manures onto tillage land will improve the biology of the soil, again allowing you to improve your soil structure and allowing you to increase yields, and maybe allowing you to get it to min-till or no-till type scenario down the line, which will be far more environmentally sustainable. Better use. So when I set out my stall to prove what were the benefits, I wanted to prove that it was more profitable, better work-life balance, and more environmentally sustainable. So one of the visits I called to was Doug Deere in January of 22 in the UK. He runs D&P Deere cattle finishers. They're finishing about 3,000 cattle a year. They're growing about 3,000 acres of crops. And as we were walking around chatting, and when we were finished, we went in, we had a cup of tea, and we were sitting down, and I said, you've told me all day about all these different benefits, but what are the major wins for you of having two enterprises as opposed to one? And he said, so obviously you can grow your own crops, you have the feed costs at first price. He explained how he hadn't sprayed any chemical phosphorus or potassium on his farm in 10 years. The only P&K fertiliser that he was spreading on his crops were the dung or farmyard manure out of his cattle feeding enterprise. So that was a huge saving. But he said the biggest benefit for him was the option to have more, to be able to employ more staff the farm was generating more profit, so they were able to employ more staff to help with the workload, but the workload was less seasonable. So they had a steady workload throughout the year, so it allowed everybody working on the farm to have a better work-life balance. And for him, that was the key benefit. On livestock farms, where a stocking rate is an issue, if you replace some of your grass ground with crops, it brings multiple benefits. You have the crop, you have feed for your animals at first cost. You're lowering your carbon footprint by growing the crops where they're being used. And also it allows you to keep carrying a sustainable stocking rate on your grassland to ensure that it stays profitable. Cover crops can be grown on larger tillage farms and grazed in a reasonable manner. They offer the chance for really quality and cheap animal feed. It also gives the opportunity to get cheap fertilizer and organic manures onto land. Multi-species and grass clover layers can be grown on cropping farms for grazing or for silage with really low chemical inputs, so that can allow them to rejuvenate their soil really quickly. When we were in Brazil, one of our first visits was to Embrapa. Embrapa is a national agricultural research body in Brazil, and they explained to us about how they have a really good integrated farming model that they use there. So in the 50s, when cropping started to ramp up in Brazil, they soon realized that their soils were very prone to erosion. There was soon a really quick uptake of no-till crop establishment, which stood them in good stead and really allowed them to keep growing their yields and growing their business to where Brazil is today. But in the 90s, they realized that they still had a lot of crop erosion, that no-till wasn't cutting the mustard. They had to do something else. So they started introducing livestock into their cropping area. The way they do it, they grow a crop of maize, they inter-row sow brachiata grass into the growing crop of maize. Once that's harvested, the light gets down to the brachiata grass. It grows really fast, up to about 6 feet tall, and it's then grazed by animals. Not grazed in an Irish context of paddock grazing and intensive rotational grazing. It's grazed in an extensive manner with a very high residue left once the animals have been taken off the field to protect the soils post-sowing of the next crop. This type of farming has been such a success in Brazil that this year there's over 10.1 million hectares of crops grown this way, and it is now seen as the reliable way to grow crops in a sustainable manner into the future. So, my recommendations. On grassland farms, crops should be introduced to allow you to grow feed for your animals, but also for sale. There's a lot of high margin crops that can be grown on a grassland farm, but if you don't have a sale for them, or if you don't have an end use for them, they can be high risk. Beet for feeding or forage maize can be really high margin crops, but if you don't have an end use for them, they're high risk. So if you have both systems, you have the option to use them yourself. On arable farms, grassland should be introduced to allow you to improve your soil structure. If you introduce grassland, be it grass clover mixes or multi-species mixes, into worn out tillage ground, or I prefer to say cropping ground as opposed to tillage ground, it'll really help rejuvenate your soil structure much faster than any technique you'll be able to use in an intensive cropping system. Cover crops should be grown where possible to produce cheap animal feed and also to help reduce your fertilizer inputs and to help increase your soils, improve your soil structure. and additional labour should be taken on to help with the additional workload. Thank you to Nuffield, the Nuffield board, the Nuffield sponsors and the Nuffield scholars who have went before me, who have allowed me to experience the highest level of hospitality for I just couldn't get over the hospitality I met with all the meetings I had, and that's down to the Nuffield scholars who have went before me and built a reputation. I'd like to thank my wife Paula, who kept the whole show on the road while I was away, and my father Matt, who gave me a day-to-day blow of what was going on the farm. Thank you.